And if that land acknowledgement means like we honor who originally had the land, why does this work for Indians but not Jews?
There's so many levels of this that is so stupid. It's a talking point that Bill Maher put out there and others have been putting out there. Well, the Jews historically have this land. So you go back 2,000 years and it's Jewish land. And so that's why they should be allowed to murder children, is because, 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, this was Jewish land. Here's Chomsky.
The biblical rights, which have absolutely no status, none. Nobody in the world can say 2,000 years ago, here's my story of what happened, so therefore I have a right to do it now. You can't live in a world like that. Nobody in the world ever makes such a claim. You want to make it? Okay, but then just admit, I'm out of the world, distinct from the world. If you really want to play that game, Palestinians have more of a right to claim to be descendants. Palestinians have more of a right to claim to be descendants of the population from 2,000 years ago than I do. So you don't want to get into that game.
Amen. And also, he's looking great.
He's looking like what's the gold rings thing?
What words are you trying to string? He's look like Gandalf.
Gandalf, thank you. Yeah, there's so many points about this. I like his that you take a white modern American Jew like myself, and you say like, do I have more direct? Am I more directly descended from the people in Palestine or Israel than Palestinians? No, not even. There's no way in hell that I have more direct descendant blood from the people 3,000 years ago. But on top of that, as Loki said in an interview on this show a couple of weeks ago, it's like saying that Londinium was a Roman colony initially, and therefore anyone from Italy could just show up and say, these are our houses.
Well, and what, like Istanbul used to be Constantinople. Should we turn that into the Eastern Roman Empire again? Like that would, because it was, or even if you went not even that far back, like let's say the Irish who fled during, it's not a famine, it was starvation, much like what's happening in Gaza is not a famine. It is starvation. If they went back to Ireland and they kicked Irish people out of their homes because they were like, hey, my great-great-grandfather fled Ireland, like you'd be like, what? That's bogus. But they haven't even, they are even closer on the timeline than these supposed Jews are. And here's the other thing. I would recommend that people check out the book, The Invention of the Jewish People by Shlomo Sand. It is an amazing book that talks about how most of us today, Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jews. Now, there are Jews known as Mizrahi Jews who were once called like Palestinians, but they couldn't call them that, so they gave them a new category. But like the Sephardic, which speaks to like Southern Europe and Northern Africa Jews, and then Ashkenazi, which is like Eastern Europe, most of us are descended from converts. And because that's not supposed to be the case, right? Because Jews are not supposed to proselytize and Jews aren't supposed to convert people. But here's the thing, that there was a lot of conversion going on throughout the, let's say, particularly when Islam started, coming onto the scene in like the 600s and the 700s, like there was a lot of kind of, oh, this is a new idea. I kind of like this. And so a lot of us never had any connection to that land. And again, even if you did, it is not more valid than the people who have been living there, the Palestinians. And again, like there are Palestinian Jews. Where do they fit into this? Yeah. Where do the Palestinian Christians fit into this? Where do the Bedouins fit into this? Like there's so many, it becomes this flat and flimsy debate. And I'm not going to take time to go through it, but we talked about it on the podcast or the stream once before, the three Israels, and how the original, I'll just say the original term.
One of them is our neighbor, Israel Jones, but you don't know him.
Yeah. The original term for the word Israel, it comes from the people who wrestle with God, because Jews are not supposed to just accept religion. We are supposed to wrestle with faith. And then I'd also talked about when we see Israel turn up in like texts talking about that you might read at like a Passover dinner or something, also not talking about the modern nation state of Israel. There were no such things as nation states.
Yeah, nation
So-
states are a pretty modern advent.
And even if you see that the name it corresponds, okay, well, what does that mean? Like in Greek, for instance, Istanbul is still called Constantinopolis. But does that mean that it is like it has to have the Greek perceived? And I know the Greeks and the Turks have a thing. I'm not, but like, does that mean that it should still be Constantinople from 1500 years ago? Of course not. So it's like this idea that the modern nation state of Israel has like a through line from 2000 years ago to today is just it's like so remarkably dumb and ahistorical. So
one last thing I'll add in here, that a clip has been going around of Bill Maher.
Colonizers. Okay, this has become like in the media. We just call the Israelis colonizers.
First of all, the mainstream media is not saying that at all. So he sounds like Fox News. Honestly, there's very little difference between Bill Maher and Fox News any longer. And then he relates it to land acknowledgement of the Native Americans.
The Jews are the Native Americans of this piece of land.
Yes, if you did a land acknowledgement like we do in this country, well, I'm standing on ground that was. Yes. I'm standing on ground that 3,000 years ago was King David's capital of Jerusalem.
Nobody in the world ever makes such a claim. You want to make it? Okay. But then just admit, I'm out of the world.
And if that land acknowledgement means like we honor who originally had the land, why does this work for Indians but not Jews?
There's so many levels of this that is so stupid, but one of them
I think he's begging to have his house stolen by an indigenous person.
That was my point. Is one of the biggest ones is, what do you mean works for the Native Americans? When we say land acknowledgement, does that mean they get everyone's house? Does that mean they can walk up and go, land acknowledgement, ours? That has never happened. Ever. There's not one instance of that. Yet Bill Maher's going, it's working for the Native Americans. And
I think according to Maher, that we should organize some folks to go knock on the White House door, be like, acknowledgement, this is Piscataway land, and then they get the White House. I think
they get the White House.
That's what he's talking about, right? That's how that works.
They get to change the name to something less offensive.
No, they just get the building and everything in it.
And actually, they get to put a different building on that spot that is not built by slaves and called the White House.